JR. It's time for another edition of the Outex Outdoor Photo Series. And I'm thrilled yet again to have such a special guest today, Jessica Haydahl, who has become really part of the Outex extended family. How are you?
I am good. I'm all finally showered after being in the woods for 5 days.
You're back.
I'm back. I'm in the lap of luxury again of, running water, showers, and indoor bathrooms. And I'm happy to be home. It was a fun trip, but I'm happy to be warm again and not have to wear rain gear all the time.
You're often out on the edges of civilization and beyond. Where did you go again?
So in Montana, there's a river called the Smith River, and it's a permit only. So you have to put in a application to try to draw a permit. And it's a very popular river for kind of a once in a lifetime trip in Montana if you do draw a permit. So I headed out with 9 women and 4 float boats, and we fly fished and I photographed, and we camped and cooked and had to set up bear-proof fences and deal with rapids and rain, and it was quite an adventure. I think I got a bit sunburned, but it was nice to get outside and kind of switch things up from the past couple months of COVID.
That's nice. Yeah, I did an ocean swim this morning.
Yeah. And
I was thrilled with that as well. It was my first swim in a while in the ocean, or period.
Yeah.
And it just felt strange but nice to be out of the house and doing something with a few people at a distance. It's nice. It's nice to get out there and remember what life used to be like, which is good. But let me do a quick intro. So Jessica is a professional photographer who shoots, like many of our ambassadors, has a multitude of talents and shoots all kinds of different photography. It's fair to say that she specializes in fishing photography, so we'll talk about that a little bit, but she does a lot of outdoor lifestyle. She lives in Montana, so there probably couldn't be a better backdrop for a lot of the photography that she does, but she does travel quite a bit. And I'm thrilled to have her on to not only talk about that, but to also contribute with her creativity, her thinking beyond what the average photographer thinks about. The MacGyver level with Jessica is definitely up there. She's always blowing our minds with her ideas and her ways of pooling resources together to put her vision, into the frame. And so thrilled to have you, Jessica. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me again. Yeah, it's been maybe a month or so since we chatted last, and I'm almost starting work again, so I'm super excited that stuff is picking back up. Companies are calling again, so it's almost time. Got an email the other day, and basically it was, "Are you ready?" And I said, "I'm ready. Just let me know." Obviously, we have to follow the restrictions of the states that I'll be going to do my work, but I'm happy to be starting work again, and it's actually been interesting couple months of finding old passions and getting outside and exercising a ton and trying to do creative stuff outside the realm of what I usually get paid to do. So but it's been work.
And that's really, I think, a creative and positive way to look at this. Is time to recharge, reinvent. I've talked to obviously several different people that are going through similar things. And it's been interesting because some are getting work. I've talked to Daniel Lee, who said his phone is ringing off the hook. He's in New York. He's a UK photographer based in New York now. And we had some projects planned together in California. So we're potentially going to pick that back up. I was talking to Ben Von Long just this week. And he's in Canada right now with his parents, where he's from. You're from Vancouver, right, Jessica?
Yeah, and I have not been able to go home to see my parents, so that's been a tough one. And I talked to my mom last night, and she said hopefully things will be opening up by maybe June 29th. And this is a long time. I'm usually try to get to see them every other month or so. I try to get to Vancouver to visit with them and my whole family. So, that's been tough. Definitely been tough, kind of being separated by borders and restrictions. And I have my parents are senior citizens. So, you just have to really be cautious and aware. So the safest place for them is there, and the safest place for me is to be away from them, basically.
Right.
So, keep everybody quarantined. But I am excited. I'll get to go to Vancouver. So I did have some projects canceled for the summer that will pick back up next year. So I'm okay with that, because I'll probably take that time to go home and see my parents and spend a little time back there. And Vancouver is a pretty great place to be in the summertime. So, and I'm never there in the summer. So I'm kind of excited when that border opens up. I'm going to head northward and take my cameras and go see them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's maybe a good segue, because that's something that I wanted to recap. And I know the story a little bit, but for people that don't, can you share with us a little bit of your trajectory into becoming a professional photographer? Walk us through, kind of how you started in photography, how you developed, and how it led you to becoming a professional.
Yeah, well, so I've been running my business now since 2008 full time. So, that's been a little while. And I didn't start off as a commercial photographer. Basically, when I was in high school, I always took a lot of photos, and none of them were that great. And finally, this was all on film. My parents kind of pushed me to take some photo courses, because they saw that I was really kind of obsessed with taking a camera everywhere where I went. And I think their hope was, if they were going to be paying for the development of my film, they wanted me to be a bit better at it. So I think that was the basis behind it. But I had an opportunity in high school to start taking photography classes, and I used my mom's old 1978 Minolta, which is on one of my collection here on the behind me.
Right.
And I started shooting. And once I kind of learned how to use those techniques in my work and learn how to actually work the camera, my photography changed. I suddenly could capture what I was actually seeing in the first place. And yeah, I bought a dark room. My dad built me a dark room at my parents' house, and I shot film for, all the way until 2006 is when I got my first digital camera. So I shot film all the way through. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I did university, a marketing advertising degree, and I played Division I women's ice hockey on full scholarship in Michigan. So, I had other things, other priorities. And then
Wolverines. All right.
No, I was at Wayne State University. So we were the Warriors. So it's right in downtown Detroit. Only Division I program in the whole state of Michigan, actually, for women. And so I did that. I followed all those passions, and crazy enough, I was photographing a ton of stuff around Detroit, and I started having professors wanting to buy images off of me. So nice. I was taking photography courses at the school, but honestly, they didn't have the program that I wanted. If I was getting a free education, I did not want an art degree. There's nothing wrong with it, but I thought for my opportunities, a marketing degree was going to be more useful and business oriented. And so, yeah, I started printing black and white images of the skylines of Detroit, and I would frame them and cut mats for them, and then I was selling them to different professors in the athletic department. And it was at that moment where I'm like, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do, kind of go into marketing. But as soon as I started selling images, it was at that moment that I was like, oh, wait, this is kind of my passion. I don't see why I'm not following it. So I graduated university and then went back to Vancouver, Canada, and did a 2-year professional photo imaging diploma in Langara College. So they take like 24 students a year or 22 students a year. They submerge you in photography 7 days a week. It's super intensive coursework. And And so when I finished those 2 years, I started rolling. But what that gave me was a chance to work with professional photographers and do practicums with them. And that's what basically launched me forward, was doing grunt work and watching these other photographers and shooting alongside of them. And from there, you know, things just started to spring forward. So I'm grateful for that.
It's interesting. I was talking to another good friend, João Carlos, who is a commercial photographer in Lisbon, spends half his time in New York. And he was saying that, you know, as a photographer, you're a business owner, you're a small business owner, and you have to wear multiple hats. You've got to be able to run a business, you know, develop the business, do the marketing, you know, do the accounting, you know, all of those things come into play. And so it's interesting to hear you talk about, you know, your degree and what you were pursuing, what you thought would be useful, but to be able to merge that back to following your passion and bringing those two things together, which when you think about it, it's lucky. Not a lot of people get a chance to do that.
Yeah, and I think like for artists, especially, you know, we're not always the best at the business side of the industry. And so for myself, I thought that would be a good leg forward before I then went and pursued. I mean, you know, when you have an eye, or you have an eye for photography or art, and you kind of already know what direction you're going in, I think you need to then work on other things to help develop you so you can launch into the kind of photography you want to do or the kind of art you want to do. And so I already had that eye. I could already see what I wanted to photograph and how to capture it. But at that point, it's like, okay, now that I have that, how do I refine it? And how do I figure out how to start in this industry? And everything from invoicing to contracts to just dealing with clients in a more professional manner. I think that all comes into play. And I went to a very technical photography college after university. I know a lot of people do a very art-oriented kind of photography programs out there, which is totally fine, but they really focused on trying to make you successful within the industry, and allow you to have that leg up and that chance. But again, like I said, like the biggest thing for me, what I took out of that whole 2-year program was the practicums. So being a hockey player myself, I had a passion for photographing kind of photojournalistic style sports photography.
Okay.
And I didn't really quite know where I was going to go fully with it, but I got a practicum with the head photographer for the Vancouver Canucks in the NHL.
Uh-huh.
And I did that for 2 years, and then that led to some paid work with the Canucks. But then that sent me, like, he would send me to shoot stuff that he himself didn't have time to shoot. And one of those things was to photograph a charity fishing event up in northern British Columbia.
Okay.
And I was already a boat captain, a tour guide. I grew up on the ocean. I drive boats and stuff like that. And so I got sent northward, you know, flying in on a private plane and then a helicopter into the backcountry, and you're shooting out of a helicopter and watching humpback whales around you, and killer whales and massive salmon and just rugged coastline and bald eagles. And it was just like that, in my mind, just kind of,
you could get used to that.
Yeah. And that's what it excelled forward. And I developed a relationship with this one fishing lodge that then sent me southward to Panama. And through that, that's where all the other connections were dialed in. And so just really being open to opportunities and knowing that sometimes it takes a while to get to where you want, and that's actually okay. Because I think at this day and age, you know, we try to get there so quickly that we don't learn from the middle portion of our journey and where we're trying to get to. So, you know, a lot of people contact me, a lot of younger photographers wanting to know, well, how do you become an outdoor photographer? How do you become a commercial photographer? And my answer is put in the time and start shooting what you want to be hired for, and put in the time and start taking photography work that will help you be a really well-rounded photographer.
That's really good advice.
So yeah, and that's how it all started.
Did you have mentors and or people whose work you looked up to, whether they were photographers or artists or other people that inspired you?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest mentor was definitely the photographer that took me on for the Vancouver Canucks. His name's Jeff Vinnick, and an incredibly accomplished photographer. I don't even know how many years he's been shooting for the NHL, but it's a long time, and that's quite a lucrative position, is to shoot for a sports team, like be their main photographer. So there was that, but I was always just kind of, I think with the advent of social media, you always continually have options and people in front of you always kind of pushing your work and helping to inspire you forward. So I do have a lot of different photographers within the industry that I work in that I try to bounce ideas off of, and their work kind of keeps me motivated and fueled. And I think that that's super important. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of females in front of me to kind of help in that regard, like having a female that I looked up to. There really wasn't that opportunity. So I had a lot of different male photographers that have been super inspiring over the years. But photography, like the old school kind of realm of photography, is photographers normally would really keep to themselves, really protect their little nest egg and really try not to be very helpful. They don't really give that much information out. And that's the era I grew up in as a photographer, was that old school mentality.
Interesting.
Boys club. Nobody wanted to help anybody because they were protecting their own product. And I think that's changing, and I'm so happy, because I always swore that I would never be that photographer. I always wanted to help as much as possible, because I don't see what the problem is with more people creating art and putting awesome imagery out there, because it just pushes me forward. It pushes me to want to get better as well. And I see someone take an awesome image and I get super excited. I'm like, oh man, that is awesome. I think I could do that, but do it this way. And so, I don't know. I think that's changing. I think people also in this industry, it was always really secretive. How much do you make? How much do you bill out? You're worried about someone undercutting you. Well, if you're really worried about someone undercutting you in this industry, we need to talk more, and we need to be more vocal about pricing and contracts and what's expected. So the people like myself who've been in this industry for a long time, aren't getting undercut by people coming in, because we're all respecting each other and we all know where we're coming in this industry and kind of what you should be charging or what you should be making at a certain level that you're at. So okay. I think things are a bit changing, and it's good to, I called a photographer the other just to chat with him to go over retainer contracts and ask him some questions about it. What's the best way? Because I don't want to, undercut someone else in the industry or give someone a better deal. Just be, and you don't want to be cheap yourself. You work hard at doing this, so you deserve to get paid. You deserve to get paid what you ask for. So
agreed. And I think you're not tooting your own horn, but you're not only talking about it, you're walking the talk, you're helping, and you're doing your part. And I know, but I want you to share a little bit of what you're doing with women photography. I know you've got a couple of groups, so tell us a bit about what you've been doing to contribute towards that very sense of community that you're talking about.
Yeah, and so again, to try to build more of a sense of community in the photography world, I don't see a lot of myself in the industry. It's myself and one other female that I know of. She works more on the fly side, and I'm more on the conventional tackle kind of commercial side of it. She's more editorial. So I don't see myself. And when I don't see myself in this industry, that means my 13-year-old niece or my 7-year-old niece or other people out there don't see themselves and what they could potentially accomplish. And so my goal is just try to get more females creating content in the outdoor space. So if that's fishing, if that's hiking, whatever it is, trying to help them create more content where it's making films, or even, you know, in the grand scheme of things, when my part of the industry in the saltwater realm, unfortunately, is quite objectifying towards women. I don't personally work with those companies, but that is like a big norm. You go to a trade show, a saltwater trade show, and there is, you know, 50, you know, tons of women walking around in bikinis, like trying to sell for a brand. Their own choice, I get it. But for me, like working hard in this industry, I am trying to represent, I believe, the majority of us women and how we want to be represented within the outdoor space. I mean, maybe I'm way off base, but that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And I think the more control us, you know, a female photographer might have over working for a brand, the more control I have in shooting the content of females, I think the more control we have in creating content that we think represents us better. So, you know, that is just kind of my overall goal. So what I'm doing is I'm running female content creative workshops on how to document a trip of, you know, sports fishing, start to finish. They were scheduled for right now in Venice, Louisiana with Journey South Outfitters, but obviously with COVID, we have luckily been able to reschedule them for September. So I've got three workshops of 4 women, all inclusive, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be a lot of fun, because we're going to try to talk about how to document from start to finish, photograph it, kind of how to carry your gear on the boat, how to safely transport gear, how to photograph on the ocean or water environments and protect your gear. Also file management. We'll go into how I edit my workflow and kind of get people dialed in, because, yeah, I don't know if you've heard this, JR, but you know, a lot of people will be like, well, I take lots of photos, but they all sit on my computer, or I just go out and they're like, oh, I go buy another SD card and they just put them away. And I'm like, well, that's not the best thing you could be doing. So
yeah,
like,
you may want to think beyond that a little bit.
Yeah. So I have a mixture of some corporate people coming. I've got some professional photographers coming, and I just have some women coming who photograph and document a ton, whether it's family trips or friends, and they just want to get better at it. So I'm really excited. We do have we did have 2 women who had to drop out just because of scheduling conflicts, so I now do have 2 openings. So if you're out there and you're a female and you want to learn more about photography, you know, just give me a shout. And
well, let's give them the link, and we'll repeat it at the end. But obviously, you can find Jessica's work on Instagram at Jessica Haydahl Richardson. Photo.
Yeah, so on Instagram it's just Haydahl Photo.
Here we go. So let me get it on the screen, and we will put the hashtags as well on the feed so people could see it. So you can see Jessica's work on her Instagram page. You can also find her website at jessicahaydalphotography.com. And is there a particular link for the women's workshop, Jessica?
Yeah, so I mean, it is the main, if you go to my blog, it still does say May dates, but you just have to ignore the May dates because now we're in September. On the blog, on my website, it's still the first item up there, but also the link on my Instagram page. You can click that, it will take you right there with all the information, or just send me a message, email me, or send me a message on Instagram, and I can send you out more information. And so yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's actually kind of neat. We have one whole corporate company who's sending 4 women from within their office because they want to help them get better at managing the content that comes into the office within the sports fishing industry. So these ladies get sent a ton of content. Well, sometimes you get sent a lot of imagery or video, and how do you piece it together? What is the best software to use? How do you organize it? How do you save your files so they look good on Instagram, whether it's video or photo? Little things like that can really actually change the production value of your content when you put it out. So that's kind of what I'm hoping. And just I just started an Instagram feed called Female Outdoor Creative Collective. And what I would like to do when I have a little bit more spare time is my goal, I would love to have other women photographers who want to contribute tips and tricks or fun information or stories to be able to put information up there. I don't want it to be just about me. There is a lot more females in this industry, but they are not really well connected. And so that's a big part of it.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned gear a couple of times, and I wanted to talk a bit about that because, again, we talked to so many different folks that had different starts. You know, there are physicists who are now professional photographers, engineers who are now professional photographers. And then there are self-taught photographers who literally picked up a camera, had no formal education, if you will, and they're some of the best photographers out there. You've had an upbringing, if you will, understanding the technology, understanding, you know, the development so that you also could backtrack to how to take better pictures. And you've seen the advent of the DSLR, the mirrorless cameras, and so on. Can you talk a little bit about your camera gear evolution, the lenses that you use and why, the lighting that you know, the things that you think about in terms of gear to make your work what it is?
Yeah, so like the main overall concept of the gear that I use when I shoot is I have gear to help enhance my photography. I don't ever want to be hindered by the gear I have. Mm-hmm. What that could mean is if you have too much gear or if you have too little gear, you know, I never wanted to be restricted by what I had or didn't have gear-wise. And when you first start out, it's very difficult to know what lenses to buy, what cameras to buy. You know, it is really complicated. There wasn't as many options though when I started. So I think my first camera was the Nikon D200. And that was one of the first prosumer digital cameras. When I say prosumer, it cost $3,000 rather than $8,000. Mm-hmm. So it was like one of the first digital cameras that came out on the market DSLR cameras that came out on the market that allowed you to, you know, buy a digital camera and not invest a ton. It was a pretty groundbreaking camera, that Nikon that originally came out. But, you know, for me, for gear, so I'm a Nikon shooter, but I also just invested in a Sony camera because I am not necessarily brand oriented. It's just what I started with. It works really well for me. I don't think you can go wrong with whatever camera you purchase nowadays. Whatever brand you purchase, you're going to get good equipment. I mean, that's the best part about the era we live in. Everybody's making pretty incredible stuff. Uh-huh. But because I'm on boats a lot and I'm really close to my subject, I like to shoot with really wide angle lenses. And I also love to photograph with prime lenses at super shallow depths of field. That is like kind of my style and what I really love to do. But it's taken me a long time to get the gear narrowed down to a good pack or like a good array of lenses and stuff for me when I'm out in the field. Uh-huh. So like this trip here in the on the Smith River, we were on a float boat and I knew it was going to be absolutely terrible weather. So I really could only pack one of the small 1440, I think it's 1440 or 1450 Pelican cases with, I took 2 cameras and 4 lenses, which was a lot, but I wanted to shoot super shallow depth of field stuff at the camp hour, you know, campfire kind of stuff, you know, setting up tents and chopping food and all that. And then for the fish stuff, I usually like to have either a wide angle or a 24 to 70. And then I needed my 70 to 200 so I could shoot landscape kind of stuff. So, you know, it took me a long time to get to this point. So what I always suggest to new photographers, don't go out and run out and buy a ton of gear. We have some great rental places that you can rent gear from online. And I do that when I'm trying to test a new lens. Sometimes I'll rent a new camera or gear for a particular shoot. I'll take it with me on the shoot and I find, well, I use it during that shoot and I'm finding I'm really enjoying it. And it's really fluid and I'm able to kind of incorporate it into what I already have. Then then it's something I'll look at buying. And if I don't think it's that great, then the rental fee can just be used as a write-off. And usually for a week rental is only like $120 maybe at some of these online rental places like borrowlens.com or lensrental.com. And there's a whole bunch of them. And ship to you.
That's good advice, yeah.
It's so easy to do. And yeah, that's how I ended up with this Sony a7R III and a 90mm macro lens, because I just kept hearing about this macro lens and how amazing it was. And I've owned many macro lenses over my camera career, and I think they're cool, but I've never used any of them to my benefit because they're okay. But I rented a Sony with that lens, and I took it on my last shoot in March before COVID. And I shot with it a ton, and it was so useful. It's a beautiful lens. I think it's one of like the top 10 most sharpest digital camera lenses ever created on DMXO or something like that. They rated it. So, anyways, yeah. So I bring various amounts of equipment depending on the situation I'm in and what I'm photographing. This trip, I didn't bring my massive 150 to 600 lens because it's going to be too heavy and I can't put it in a little Pelican case. So you kind of got to pick and choose and figure out what you like to shoot best. So
okay. One of the things I love about your work is that I guess it combines some of the things that you've already mentioned, like the photojournalistic storytelling component that frames the experience. But then there's also an intimacy and a sense of being in the action. And so some of what you're mentioning makes sense in terms of wide angle lenses being in the middle of it all.
Yeah, dynamic imagery is what I think that's what, when I think of wide angle lens and I'm really close to my subject, it's like I always classify it as like I want that image to look super dynamic. And that is kind of like, what I see wide angle. It's a look for sure, but I think it's very dynamic looking imagery. It makes you feel you're right there in that moment and you're moving just with that subject,
Right. Yeah, and it makes sense with some of the things that you're describing. Do you find that knowing the subject matter, if you will, right? So I was talking to a sports photographer that used to be a triathlete, a runner, a cyclist, and now does sports photography. And there are many examples of that being intimate with the subject matter. Do you find that very helpful? And do you find that over the years it gives you a perspective that others may not have?
For some reason.
Yeah, I think you really need to know your subject and what you're shooting. I think you need to have background behind it. And if you don't, and you get this great opportunity to go photograph something new, that's awesome. But you can always do a little bit of research beforehand. And that is so easy for us to do nowadays. I mean, with YouTube University out there, I mean, you can pretty much, you have the power in your hand to figure out or to educate yourself before you go and photograph, whatever you're being hired to do or whatever you want to photograph. And so for me, like going back to when I had my first practicum in the NHL and the Vancouver Canucks, part of why I got selected out of all the students that applied was because I was a hockey player. I was a full, Division I women's ice hockey player. So I had the experience. I knew the game. I knew what was going on. I knew the angles. Maybe I had never photographed it before myself, but you already have a sense of play and what's important and what you're looking for. And that kind of stuff is so, so important. So when it comes to, sometimes
you could shoot not where the puck was, but where the puck was going to be, right?
Exactly. You could follow it. And that was one of the things the photographer had told me later on, like a year after. He was like, yeah, that's why you got the practicum, is because you had experience in it. So it wasn't like I just wanted to go sit at an NHL game for free and just like watch them play. Like, no, like I knew what was going on. And when that puck hits the net, you're looking for the goal scorer. You're looking for the celebration. You're turning to maybe the fans when a goal is scored to get a whole different perspective of a fan's reaction. And so there's so many different elements that fall into when you're shooting that educating yourself before, or figuring out kind of how the industry that you're trying to get into works is super important. So for sports fishing, you know, I've been lucky. I photographed a massive array of sports fishing, from salmon to marlin and everything in between. But if I, let's see, I went to Christmas Island last year and I was photographing bonefish, and I had very little experience photographing bonefish on the flats. So what do? I go on to Instagram and I start looking at images, and I start looking at, well, what's the environment I'm going to be in? What kind of gear do I think I need? I start reaching out to other photographers that have had that experience, because I want to be as prepared as I can when I get there. And when I get there, it's go time, and we just shoot, because I have a job to do. So I never want to be that person fiddling with my camera, not knowing how to work it, or not knowing what the rules are or what I'm supposed to do. So you need to be, you know, you need to also pretend like you don't know everything, and make sure that you do ask questions and educate yourself. That's the bottom line, you know.
Jessica, help us laymen when it comes to fishing photography understand as well the dynamic, because you mentioned the rules and understanding the dynamic of what's going on. You know, just like hockey, you've got to know what to expect and what's going to happen next. How do you decide which boat to be in? Do you get a choice? Do you get assigned? Can you have drones? Can you go from boat to boat? Walk us through a little bit the dynamic of fishing photography for people that may be watching this, aspiring to become a better fishing photographer. What advice do you have? What are some of the places where they can learn more about, or what to think about when they're coming into that environment?
Yeah, so for a lot of the time when I'm on a commercial shoot, not so much editorial shoot. So like editorial would be all like the magazine stuff. Commercial shoots would be packaging, brochures. My imagery would be in maybe like sporting goods stores. Like that's kind of the commercial side of it, where editorial would be print media. So when I get sent somewhere to do the commercial side, if it's a full-out commercial shoot, we'll usually have boats planned, a chase boat, or I might not have a choice. I might just be on that person's boat all day. So you kind of want to capture a really well-rounded day in whatever product you're shooting. So if I'm going to go shoot for a lure brand, a lot of the time the lure brands don't just need pictures of their lures. They want you to feel like their brand is atmosphere, and it's like part of a lifestyle. It's the lure you need to go and catch that fish. So like, how do we represent that? Well, let's just make it super easy. I'm meeting a fisherman on their bass boat, and all I have is the bass boat to be on. I have no other boat around. So we'll go out, I'll photograph a lot of casting, a lot of pitching baits out, hook sets, holding up fish in the water, leaning over the side of the boat. And then if there's an opportunity, I say, okay, drop me off on shore. Let's get shots of you trolling along when you're casting out, or get some fake hookups, you know, because we kind of have to use what we have. I love being on other boats when we have a sunrise or a sunset, and I have a chance of getting some beautiful silhouette, like that image that just popped up there with atmosphere and fog. You know, it's that kind of stuff that draws people into imagery. And then when I'm photographing, say, salmon up in northern BC it's a company called West Coast Fishing Club, and I've shot for them for I think 12 years now. I'm on my own boat out there racing around, and we've got the radios to contact when someone has a big fish they're going to release. I get in nice and close. I drop bumpers off the side. I instruct the individuals on the other boat on how they're going to hold my boat off, and I lean in the water and shoot a release of a salmon. And so, I mean, there's so many different things you can do to get creative. You just have to be willing to be creative on the spot at the moment in order to capture such a wide variety of images. And like I said, I come to photography as a very editorial-based photographer. I like to photograph, even for a commercial company, start to finish. Like, what is that lifestyle atmosphere feel behind their product? That's what I try to bring to a shoot, to a company. And I think it's quite successful. You know, I shoot a ton. I like to work and shoot. And that gives the company so many options from, we'll throw the drone up in the air just to get landscape images, stuff that they might blow up and put on a poster and throw their logo on and throw it up in Cabela's or Bass Pro Shop or something like that. So, there's just so many different avenues that you could go when photographing. Then sometimes I'm photographing a specific angler who's like a pro for a brand. And then we're focusing more on them and what they're known for, and them with the fish and them with the rods. And, but the approach at the start is basically all the same. Start to finish, how can we capture this and make it look and make it feel like, say, the average Joe or not the average Joe, just somebody who loves to go fishing can see these images and be like, man, that brand is very similar to what I do. I go fishing in the morning and I'm out nice and early when the fog is coming up and the sun's rising. And I love to fish. And I think that's kind of what you're trying to accomplish in a shoot. So
that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. How about, and before I do that, I want to invite questions from the audience. So again, if you guys have questions, feel free to send them and we'll answer them now. If you're seeing this on delay, you can still post questions and we'll try to respond to them here and on the website. The link is in the bio. So Jessica, what about no-nos or lessons that you've learned that newbies, I guess, should avoid or things to look out for when they're in a tournament or things that they can benefit from your past experience?
Yeah, so I mean, if we go, let's start with like tournament stuff. So, when I'm photographing bass stuff, I'm not usually photographing them in competition because usually we're doing a commercial shoot. So I'm there a couple days before. They might be practicing. So you have to be really cognizant of that. You have to say, they are, depending on what industry of the fishing realm these different anglers are in, they're very used to working with sponsors. And part of their contracts actually state that they have to give sponsorship so many days of their time so they get all this product and get paid. Most of them get paid by the companies. So they're all very willing. I've never ran into someone who was not willing to the game. And this is part of the game. This is part of the deal. And so if it's bass fishing, I'm usually there a couple days before the tournament. They might be on their practice zone. And so for me, it's usually like, hey, I know you're maybe they're scouting beds, which basically means the bass will be spawning on a bed and they stay there and they won't be moving. So what these guys do, well, they'll go around the whole lake and they'll look for these beds and then they mark them on their GPS. If it's a big fish they can see. And then that's where they'll race to when the start of the tournament to try to catch that specific fish because those fish don't move. So if that's the situation, those guys aren't going to pull those fish out of the water because they don't want anybody else practicing on that lake to see them potentially bringing, a 6-pound fish out of the water or 4-pound fish out of the water or whatever. And so sometimes, we have to just pick and choose our opportunities as photographers. So if I'm on their boat, they're practicing, this is their living, I get it. So I have to kind of be like, okay, so I just need like 2 fish in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. Don't get me the biggest fish. And most of them are super willing. They're like, okay, well, when the opportunity's right, we'll grab a fish off a bed and we'll use that fish real quick for images and we'll put it back. And so, you just have to kind of, again, educate yourself on the rules and know what they're doing. And a lot of that has just been from me asking a lot of questions, okay, so how does this affect your getting ready for your tournament? And I don't want to be a hindrance to them. And the next thing is, say if we're out during a marlin fishing tournament, billfish tournament, been in Costa Rica, legally I can't touch any of the rods in a tournament or else it doesn't count. So you have to be super cognizant of that. So if I'm working my way to the back of the boat and I'm photographing and I'm looking through my camera and suddenly a rod goes off, and if I bump into the rod and the angler grabs it, it does not count.
Wow.
So just knowing the rules of that kind of stuff. Now, I don't shoot a ton of tournaments. I am commercially based. So sometimes when I get sent to tournaments, it's just to shoot in action. But salmon fishing tournaments, the same thing. one of the lodges, we do a whole catch and release one, and generally only once the fish has been netted, the salmon gets revived, and usually the guide is the only one allowed to release it. But we have kind of worked with the rule committee, so if it's a big fish, the angler can get down on their knee and lean over the boat and hold that fish, so they have an opportunity to release it, and then I photograph that. So it does vary, but it's all pretty much the same. The best thing, again, just ask questions, Google it, find out information beforehand, so you're not the one messing things up, because that would be horrible.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah.
What questions haven't I asked that I should have, or other things that you think are worth mentioning for people watching and wanting to know more about your work?
Yeah, I think like one thing that I always tell young photographers, so people call me and ask me questions, which I'm totally fine with, but I think this day and age, we're really used to instant gratification, no matter what that entails. It's usually you buy yourself a camera, you want to be a photographer, and you want to be a photographer yesterday. I always tell like people that it takes time. And if you come rolling into the industry, giving away images for free at every right, left, and center turn, you're not doing yourself any favors. You're not helping anybody else either. And it's okay if it takes time. And a lot of people call and say they want to be an outdoor photographer. And I say, that's great. But are you a photographer right now? And they're like, no, I'm doing this, this, and this. I said, well, why don't you become a professional photographer first and then worry about where you want to specialize? So go out and shoot weddings, shoot engagement photos, shoot baby portraits, shoot family photos, shoot landscapes, shoot all this stuff to help make you a much well-rounded, much better photographer, and then shoot the specialized stuff that you like. You might not be getting paid to go out and photograph it yet, but go and shoot that stuff, because the more experience you have in shooting a wide variety of imagery, the better overall rounded photographer you'll be. And I shot weddings for years. They're great money. Why wouldn't you shoot weddings? They're such great money. But a wedding shot taught me how to be a food photographer, a architect photographer, a portrait photographer, environment photographer. It taught me how to be this massive, well-rounded photographer. When I go into the commercial side of it and I'm shooting sports fishing, I can shoot from portraits to detail to macro. We don't have to deal with food as often, but like I can shoot such a wider array of photographs because I took the time earlier on in my career to work on my skills and to shoot things that were out of my comfort zone. So that's like something I always kind of try to leave with people, that without, that instant gratification of just wanting to be an outdoor photographer and just having your mindset on it. I mean, that's great, but why don't you become a professional photographer first and start working your way to where you want to specialize?
That's awesome. And good advice and well said. I cannot thank you enough. It's always so good talking to you. You always give us such good, insightful advice. And, it's just wonderful to see the work that you create. And the more I learn about the other stuff that you do, the more I find that we have in common as well.
Yeah,
so,
our mountain biking passions.
our biking, our outdoorsy stuff, it's really phenomenal. I'm really thrilled that it seems like things are hopefully going to continue to open up. And like we were saying in the beginning, I think, if we're all smart about it and can do things in a different way now, we can slowly get back to the new normal. And I was excited to be coming your way this summer for an event that unfortunately got postponed.
Yeah.
But hopefully we'll have an opportunity to get together in person soon. Maybe we'll find a mountain biking event, or I could bring my bike up and you can help me tune it up, because you're probably a better bike mechanic by now than I am.
After I edit some images today, I'm gonna go install new disc brakes. I mean, again, YouTube University is the best thing ever created. I've learned how to build a whole new bike, and if it wasn't for COVID, I wouldn't have done it. And it's actually been super interesting. So, I understand why bike mechanics charge a lot, though, because they can do it so quickly, where I take forever to get it done. So, yeah, I'm installing new disc brakes today, so I can stop a little bit more, a little faster when I'm going too fast down the hill. So we'll see how it goes. If not, I can always just take it into the bike mechanic. But I do need to work on editing before I go and play in the garage for a bit. So,
well, you do that, but be safe. Thank you so much for sharing your vast experience with us, and we'll do it again sometime soon.
Sounds good, JR. You take care and watch out for sharks.
Thank you so much. I will.
Bye.
Be well. See ya. Bye-bye.